El Reno Tornado. On May 31, 2013, 55-year-old Tim Samaras was guiding his team through Canadian County, Oklahoma, chasing what would later be labeled the widest tornado ever documented. An engineer and veteran storm researcher, Tim had spent more than 2 decades deliberately driving toward tornadoes instead of away from them. He even held a Guinness World Record for capturing the most extreme pressure drop ever measured inside a tornado, a 100 millibar plunge near Manchester, South Dakota, back in 2003. Among storm chasers, Tim had a reputation for being almost obsessively cautious. The National Geographic Society trusted him enough to fund his fieldwork 80 different times. Riding with him that day were his 24-year-old son, Paul, who not only shared his father's birthday but also his love for documenting the natural world, and Carl Young, 45, a meteorologist and geology teacher who handled navigation duties. The trio operated under the name TWWX, short for Tactical Weather Instrumented Sampling and Tornadoes Experiment. Their goal was simple in theory and terrifying in practice. Place custom-built probes directly in the path of tornadoes to measure what happens inside them, but on this particular chase, they weren't in Tim's usual reinforced 3/4-ton truck, the one built to take hail and extreme winds. Instead, they were driving Carl's completely stock Chevrolet Cobalt. The reason wasn't bravery, it was logistics. The car was needed to carry high-speed camera gear for a lightning research project. Its trunk was loaded with equipment, including heavy barometric probes, leaving the vehicle badly underpowered and painfully out of its element. Just after 6 p.m., a supercell storm formed west of El Reno. By 6:03, a tornado touched down roughly 8 miles west-southwest of town. Then, it exploded in size. In just 30 seconds, it expanded from about 1 mile wide to an astonishing 2.6 miles across, wrapped in thick rain. The tornado hit its true scale, turning visual estimates into dangerous guesses. As Tim, Paul, and Carl drove along Reuter Road, surrounded by wheat fields, they believed the tornado was tracking southeast at 6:23 p.m. That assumption collapsed. The tornado abruptly changed direction, turning straight toward them and surging forward, its speed jumping from around 20 miles per hour to nearly 60 miles per hour. Carl noticed something deeply wrong. The rain around their car suddenly stopped, and the wind fell unnaturally quiet. Over the radio, Tim spoke the words no chaser wants to say. Actually, I think we're in a bad spot. Moments later, their vehicle was hit by a powerful subvortex racing at about 175 miles per hour inside the larger tornado. The small Cobalt was lifted off the ground and hurled violently through the air. When responders located the wreckage the next morning, the car was crushed beyond recognition. Tim was still in the driver's seat. Paul and Carl had been thrown from the vehicle, their bodies discovered hundreds of yards away across a massive debris field. It marked the first time professional storm chasers were killed directly by a tornado. That day, the El Reno tornado claimed 8 lives and injured 151 others. It still stands as the widest tornado ever measured, with wind speeds estimated to exceed 313 miles per hour. Weather Channel nightmare. That same afternoon, May 31, 2013, while chaos was unfolding near El Reno, Weather Channel meteorologist Mike Betties was also tracking the tornado just a few miles away from the TwistX team. Different crews, same monster? Betties had been with the Weather Channel since 2003 and was leading their tornado hunt that day. Riding with him were producer Austin Anderson behind the wheel, cameraman Brad Reynolds, and 3 engineers. They moved as a 3-vehicle convoy along Highway 81, including the Betties Mobile and the Bloom Mobile, a vehicle named in memory of NBC journalist David Bloom, who had died in Iraq. The team had just wrapped up a live broadcast and believed they were safely positioned. Betties had been watching the funnel from several miles out and assumed they were clear. What he couldn't see was the real problem. The tornado was far larger than it looked, and it was in the middle of making its lethal turn. Engineer Kevin Parrish was driving the lead vehicle when he felt something deeply wrong. His truck lifted slightly, then slammed back down hard enough that debris blasted through the windshield. In front of him, he watched the Betties mobile, carrying Betties, Anderson, and Reynolds, rise completely off the ground. Parrish estimated the SUV was lifted 20 to 30 feet into the air. Later, he said it looked like someone had slid a spatula underneath and casually flipped it like a pancake. The GMC Yukon flew across 2 lanes of highway, cleared the center median, crossed 2 more lanes, and vanished from sight. Parrish's truck eventually slid into a ditch, its rear windows blown out. For a few terrifying moments, the only sound was the overwhelming roar of the tornado. The radios were silent. Then came the realization: the Betty's Mobile was gone. The vehicle had been hurled roughly 200 yards into an open field. When it finally stopped moving, the roof had collapsed inward. Austin Anderson suffered the most severe injuries. The crushed roof came down on him, causing neck and spinal damage, a cracked sternum, 5 broken ribs, and a fractured vertebra. Betty's himself escaped with cuts and swallowed glass from the shattered windows. He needed 3 stitches in his left hand. According to a lawsuit Anderson later filed, an NBC engineer had disabled the SUV's airbag system before the trip, something Anderson claimed made his injuries significantly worse. Storm chaser Reed Timmer soon arrived in his armored Dominator vehicle. He and his team had been chasing for KFOR-TV when they spotted the destroyed SUV. They stopped to help alongside the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, but were forced to leave as the storm closed back in. All 3 inside the Betty's Mobile survived. Anderson faced months of recovery and multiple surgeries. During the violent tumbling, Betty said he shut his eyes and felt completely weightless, briefly wondering if he had died. In that moment, he experienced what he described as an almost angelic vision of his wife, Allison, whom he had married just months earlier. The ordeal left him with symptoms of PTSD, but with support, he returned to storm chasing the very next year. History, apparently, doesn't always scare people into stopping. Sometimes it just dares them to come back. The Texas incident. On March 28, 2017, 57-year-old Kelly Williamson and 55-year-old Randall Yarnell were tearing down back roads in the Texas Panhandle, chasing a tornado near Spur, roughly 55 miles southeast of Lubbock. The 2 weren't random thrill seekers. They were well-known faces from Weather Channel's Storm Wranglers and had been friends since elementary school. Both worked for Stormview Live, a company that supplied real-time storm footage to major weather networks. About 2 years earlier, Williamson had convinced Yarnell to join him working with the Weather Channel. They were under contract and live streaming the chase on Facebook that evening. But behind the scenes, not everyone was impressed. Several storm chasers had privately raised red flags with Weather Channel producers. Just weeks before the crash, one chaser had sent texts warning that Williamson's driving habits were troubling. As night approached, Williamson and Yarnell were heading north on Farm to Market Road 181. Their Chevrolet Suburban was locked into cruise control at close to 70 miles per hour. They didn't know the area well. Storm tracking gear partially blocked the windshield, and the maze of rural roads wasn't familiar territory. At the same time, 25-year-old Corbin Lee Jagger was driving west on Farm to Market Road 2794, traveling legally with the right-of-way, locked onto the storm and not the road. Williamson and Yarnell never stopped at the intersection. The Suburban blew straight through the stop sign at full speed. What followed wasn't dramatic, just final. The impact was catastrophic. All 3 men were killed instantly. Williamson, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was thrown from the vehicle. Yarnell and Jagger, both buckled in, died on impact. The Facebook live stream ended mid-chase, without explanation. 2 years later, a lawsuit filed by Jagger's mother painted a darker picture. It alleged that Williamson and Yarnell had a documented pattern of reckless driving, blowing through stop signs, running red lights, driving onto private property, and going off-roado, all caught on camera to heighten the sense of danger. According to the suit, the Weather Channel was aware of these behaviors, but continued to employ them anyway, allegedly even encouraging the risk by directing them during broadcasts to get more intense footage. Eventually, Jagger's mother filed a $125 million wrongful death lawsuit against the Weather Channel. Sometimes the danger isn't the storm, it's the chase. The Lindsay shooting. On March 13, 1990, Bill Miracle was doing something so routine it barely registered as risky. He was out photographing severe weather for Oklahoma City TV station KWTV, the same job he'd been doing for decades. Miracle wasn't new to this world. With more than 30 years behind a camera, he'd worked everything from Hollywood sets to local news, covering police scenes, fires, and just about every kind of chaos Oklahoma City could offer. That Tuesday evening, Shortly after 7 p.m., Miracle and KWTV reporter Dave Ballot were parked in an unmarked station vehicle on a dirt road near Lindsay, Oklahoma, roughly 45 miles south of Oklahoma City. They were waiting to capture footage from a tornado outbreak that had already spawned multiple twisters. The location was quiet, rural, and wide open, perfect for filming storms without buildings, traffic, or people getting in the way. What they didn't know was that weather was about to become the least relevant danger. As they sat watching the storms, two individuals suddenly walked up to the news vehicle. There was no warning, no confrontation. Before either man could react, Ballot heard glass shatter. The bullet hit Miracle square in the chest, lodging deep in his right lung.
He began shouting for help almost immediately.
Ballot, physically unharmed but stunned, tried to assist while calling for emergency responders. It didn't take long to piece together what had happened. The news crew had unknowingly parked themselves right next to a drug deal. Seeing an unmarked van filled with electronic equipment, the dealers panicked. They assumed law enforcement had rolled in and decided to shoot first. Emergency crews rushed Miracle to Lindsay Hospital, where doctors worked to stabilize him. The bullet had caused serious internal damage and bleeding in his right lung. Once his condition was under control, he was transferred to Baptist Medical Center in Oklahoma City. There, doctors faced a difficult call. The bullet was buried deep in lung tissue. Removing it would mean opening his chest and cutting directly through the lung. According to Baptist Medical Center spokesperson Randy, doctors concluded the surgery posed more risk than leaving the bullet where it was. They chose not to operate. Despite being shot in the chest just hours earlier, Miracle was listed in fair condition and recovering better than expected. In time, he made a full recovery and returned to work, though the bullet stayed in his lung for the rest of his life. Later, Miracle would share the story with students, using it as a blunt reminder that no footage, no assignment, and no story is worth dying for. To this day, the Lindsay shooting stands as one of the strangest, non-weather-related incidents in storm chasing history. Proof that sometimes the most dangerous thing out there isn't the storm at all. The Oklahoma students. Late on the night of April 29, 2022, 3 University of Oklahoma meteorology students were heading home after what Drake would later describe as the greatest night he'd ever lived. Behind the wheel of a 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan was 20-year-old Nicholas Zen from Denton, Texas. Riding with him were Gavin Short, 19, from Grace Lake, Illinois, and Drake Brooks, 22, from Evansville, Indiana. Earlier that day, the trio had driven north into Kansas to chase severe weather. At 8:07 p.m., they spotted and recorded a small, dusty tornado about 4 miles north of Harrington, Kansas. Short quickly shared the footage on social media. For Brooks, it was a milestone, his very first tornado. The adrenaline was still running high long after the storm faded. Not long after, Brooks called his family from the road. He told his mother, full of excitement, that it was the best night of his life. Just before 11:30 p.m., as they traveled southbound on Interstate 35 near Tonkawa, roughly 85 miles north of Oklahoma City, the situation changed fast. Rain was falling, and the pavement was slick. Without warning, Nicholas's Volkswagen the SUV slid off to the right, then bounced back onto the interstate. But it was no longer drivable. The vehicle came to a stop in the outside lane, stranded and blocking traffic. They didn't have time to do anything else. A semi-truck traveling south in the same direction slammed into the disabled Volkswagen with immense force. The impact crushed the SUV beneath the truck, trapping all 3 students inside instantly. Emergency crews rushed to the scene and worked for more than 5 hours, fighting twisted metal and wreckage to reach them. In the end, there was nothing they could do. All 3 young men were pronounced dead at the scene. The truck driver suffered only minor injuries and was later released. One moment, it was the perfect ending to a dream chase. The next, it was over, not because of a tornado, but because the road itself became the final hazard. The Minnesota truck. In May 2022, 30-year-old Martha Llanos Rodriguez, a storm-chasing meteorologist from Mexico City, was following intense weather across southwestern Minnesota alongside 3 colleagues from South America. Rodriguez had traveled thousands of miles to study severe thunderstorms firsthand. Her team included Diego Campos behind the wheel, along with 2 meteorologists from Chile. Throughout the day, They had been carefully tracking powerful storm systems moving through the region. That evening, they were driving along Interstate 90, a major east-west highway cutting across southern Minnesota. The storms they'd been chasing weren't producing tornadoes, but they were packing brutal straight-line winds, strong enough to knock down trees and rip power lines onto roadways. As daylight faded, the group found themselves moving through the storm's aftermath. Ahead of them, power lines had been blown down and were lying directly across the interstate lanes. Campos spotted the danger and made an instant call, stopped the vehicle completely. It was the correct decision. Downed power lines can still carry thousands of volts, and driving over them can be instantly fatal. The team brought their car to a full stop on I-90 and turned on their hazard lights, hoping to alert approaching traffic. What they didn't see was the semi-truck coming up fast from behind. In the darkness and rain, visibility was poor. The truck driver either didn't notice the stopped vehicle in time or couldn't react quickly enough. At highway speed, the semi slammed straight into the back of the meteorologist's car with overwhelming force. The crash was catastrophic. Martha Janos Rodriguez was killed instantly. Diego Campos and the two Chilean meteorologists were injured but survived. Their injuries, while painful, were not life-threatening. Another member of the group, Bradford Barrett, an American meteorologist based in Chile, suffered severe critical injuries and required immediate emergency care. When word spread, the storm-chasing community was shaken. Rodriguez was remembered as a gifted young scientist who had crossed continents to follow her passion. Her death came just 2 weeks after 3 University of Oklahoma students, Drake Brooks, Nicholas Nair, and Gavin Short, were killed in a separate accident while driving home from a chase, sending shockwaves through an already grieving community. The incident reinforced a hard truth veteran chasers had known for years. While tornadoes and lightning grabbed the headlines, the most dangerous part of storm chasing is often the driving long hours, dark roads, debris, and limited visibility. Rodriguez's death brought the number of storm-chasing fatalities during the spring of 2022 to 4, marking it as one of the deadliest seasons in the history of the pursuit. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and drop suggestions for future videos in the comments.